When Farid asked about the decision to speed up the giving, about why now, I didn't hesitate. The answer has always been clear to me. What good is wealth if it just sits there while the world burns, floods, sickens, and breaks down in places it shouldn't? When people talk about wealth, there's often a tendency to glorify it, to see it as a final destination, as if once a certain number is reached, you've won. But that mindset has always struck me as both narrow and unproductive. Because the real question isn't how much you accumulate, but what you choose to do with it. Wealth, at its core, is a resource, a powerful one, but it only has meaning when it's used thoughtfully, strategically, and with a deep sense of responsibility. We don't get to choose where we're born or the circumstances we're raised in, but those of us who have benefited from systems that rewarded innovation, access, and scale, those of us who've been fortunate enough to succeed in those systems, do have a choice about what happens next. That's where wealth becomes more than just a personal asset. It becomes a tool that, when pointed in the right direction, can begin to solve problems that were previously thought of as too big, too entrenched, or too complex. Think about the greatest challenges of our time. We have children still dying of preventable diseases, despite the fact that we have the knowledge and tools to save them. We have students being left behind in systems that aren't equipped to support their growth. We have climate disasters threatening the very stability of our ecosystems and economies. None of these problems are unsolvable, but many of them are underfunded, overlooked, or just waiting for someone to say, "I'm going to help fix this." That's where wealth comes in, not as a trophy to admire, but as fuel for progress. And when you start looking at it through that lens, you begin to realize that its true power is only unlocked when you let go of the need to preserve it for yourself, and instead aim it outward. This isn't just about charity, it's about impact, it's about being deliberate. What's the return on investment if 1 million more people get access to clean water? What's the value of a life saved through early diagnosis and treatment? What's the long-term gain when a student in a low-resource community becomes a teacher, a scientist, an engineer because they had access to high-quality education? These aren't abstract outcomes. They're measurable, life-changing results that ripple outward. And it's not just about scale, it's about timing. Delayed action in the face of crisis is the silent killer of opportunity. If resources are available today to solve a problem, why wait? Every day that passes is a missed chance to prevent suffering, to accelerate innovation, to build resilience. Wealth that sits idle isn't neutral. It's a lost opportunity. When you're fortunate enough to have the resources to act, the calculus changes. It's not a matter of can I help? It becomes how can I not? And when you see the tangible outcomes, when a new crop grows where once there was barren land, when a village has light at night for the first time, when a mother no longer has to walk miles for clean water, you begin to understand just how transformative thoughtful giving can be. Of course, no one person can solve every issue, but that's the point. It was never about doing everything. It's about doing something strategically, sustainably, and with the same rigor we apply in the business or tech world. We test, we analyze, we learn, we adapt. That approach doesn't stop when we move into philanthropy. If anything, it becomes even more vital, because the stakes aren't quarterly profits, they're human lives. There's also something deeply humbling about stepping back and realizing that your contribution is just one part of a much larger ecosystem. You're not the hero of the story, you're a supporter, a funder, a connector. The real innovation often comes from the people on the ground, those with lived experience, creativity, and drive. Your role is to help remove the barriers that slow them down. And while it might feel counterintuitive, giving strategically and generously isn't about sacrifice. It's about fulfillment. There's an unmatched sense of purpose that comes from knowing your efforts are creating real positive change. That's a kind of return that money can't buy, and once you've seen that in action, you can't unsee it. You don't look at wealth the same way again. The goal isn't to be remembered for what you had, it's to be remembered for what you did when you had the means to do it. That's the metric that matters. That's the kind of legacy worth building. In the end, wealth is just potential. What transforms it into something meaningful is how we use it, and how urgently we act when we know we can make a difference. Not tomorrow, not someday, but now, because the clock doesn't wait for any of us, and the world needs solutions that move faster than the problems. So let's not frame success by accumulation. Let's frame it by contribution. That's the future worth working toward. Every day, the world offers a stark reminder. Time is not on our side. Whether it's rising temperatures, the next pandemic threat, collapsing education systems, or food insecurity, these issues aren't waiting for permission to escalate. They're accelerating, and the longer we delay, the harder, sometimes impossible, it becomes to course correct. The challenges we face globally don't just demand attention, they demand urgency. And not just from governments or scientists, but from anyone with the ability and the resources to make a meaningful impact. The pace of modern crisis is faster than most systems are built to respond to. We're talking about compounding threats, where a health emergency bleeds into an economic collapse, which then fuels political instability, which worsens inequality. These are not isolated problems, they're deeply interconnected. And what that means is simple. Any solution that arrives too late is barely a solution at all. In the technology world, we're trained to think ahead, to anticipate needs before they become bottlenecks. That mindset of iteration, of urgency, of acting before it's too late, needs to carry over into how we address global challenges. The idea that we can slowly fund our way out of disaster, that we can wait and see before deploying real resources, has been disproven time and time again. The cost of inaction always outweighs the price of preparedness. Take health as just one example. During disease outbreaks, the window between identifying a threat and containing it is razor thin. A vaccine that arrives a year too late is no longer a breakthrough, it's a postmortem. Speed matters, infrastructure matters, funding in advance, not after the crisis, matters, and it's not about charity, it's about preventing chaos. The same is true for climate. We know what needs to be done. The science is clear. The innovation is available. But the difference between acting now and acting in 10 years is the difference between mitigation and devastation. There's also a misconception that meaningful change takes generations. While some progress is slow by nature, much of it is delayed by hesitation, not by complexity. When resources meet willpower and data meets urgency, things can move faster than people expect. In education, for instance, digital learning platforms, when deployed correctly, can turn learning deserts into high, functioning classrooms. Agricultural innovations, if delivered on time, can prevent famine instead of reacting to it. The technology exists, the tools are ready. The only question is whether we're prepared to move as fast as the problems. But urgency isn't just about speed, it's about priority. It means recognizing that global challenges are not background noise to be addressed once everything else is settled. They are the central issue. They shape the stability, prosperity, and future of every country, rich or poor. And solving them is not someone else's responsibility. If we have resources, expertise, or influence, then we have a role to play, now, not later. What we need is a shift in mindset, away from reactive cycles and toward proactive, systemic responses, away from temporary fixes and toward long-term resilience that only happens when urgency drives decision-making, not fear, but focus. The kind of urgency that says, this is the moment, we won't get another chance to fix this. There's an opportunity here, too. Urgency creates momentum. It aligns diverse actors toward a common goal. It breaks the inertia that often slows good ideas. And it opens space for innovation to lead. Some of the most impressive breakthroughs we've ever seen happened because people refused to wait, because they knew the consequences of delay, because they understood that ambition without action is just a speech. So this is the call. Act while the window is open. Use the tools we have now, because the problems won't wait for better timing. And remember, when we act urgently, we're not just responding to crisis. We're changing outcomes. We're creating the possibility of a future that looks different from the trajectory we're on. The problems are serious. The timeline is tight. But if we meet these challenges with urgency, not panic, but purpose, we still have a chance to build something better. And that's worth moving fast for. There's something powerful about the moment you realize that everything you build, everything you achieve, eventually becomes less about you and more about what it makes possible for others. That's the point where success begins to take on deeper meaning. It's easy, especially in the early chapters of life or work, to be focused on the climb on solving hard problems, creating value, scaling ideas. But over time, the question shifts from what can I do to what am I leaving behind. A legacy isn't a monument. It's not your name carved into a wall. It's the ripple effect of the choices you make and the lives you touch, directly or indirectly. It's what continues to work long after you're done. And the truth is, the most valuable legacies are not the ones that draw attention, but the ones that quietly reshape what's possible for the next person in line. When you spend enough time thinking about impact, you begin to recognize that legacy starts with intention. It's not accidental. It's built through a series of decisions that put long-term outcomes ahead of short-term rewards. It requires you to look past the horizon of your own experience and consider the challenges others will face. People you'll never meet, in places you'll never go, and that's humbling because it forces a kind of responsibility. If you have the ability to solve problems, you also carry the responsibility to try. It's a myth that you need to be perfect to make a difference. What you need is to stay committed to learning, to improving, to showing up where it matters. Because even small contributions, when focused and sustained, can create waves of progress. A scholarship can change the future of a family. A medical breakthrough can rewrite the fate of entire communities. A well-timed investment in the right innovation can unlock opportunities that didn't exist before. Legacy isn't a grand finale. It's a process, a pattern of doing good work over and over in a way that outlives you. There's also something deeply personal about shaping what you leave behind. It forces you to ask hard questions. What values guided your work? What kind of example are you setting? Are you building systems that last or just moments that fade? In a world that often rewards speed and spotlight, legacy asks you to think long-term and long-range. It asks you to build infrastructure, not just headlines, to focus on durable change, not applause. And while no one can solve everything, each of us can choose where to show up. You don't have to be everywhere, but in the places you do engage, you can aim to be useful, thoughtful, and generous. That's how change scales, not through isolated brilliance, but through consistent effort and collaboration. The most meaningful legacies are often the quietest. The child who grows up healthier because someone funded vaccine delivery to her village. The student who finds a new path because a digital classroom was built where none existed before. These are not moments people read about in the news, but they are the reason the work matters. And when you start to frame success in those terms, not in awards or rankings, but in lives made better, it redefines what counts as winning. Legacy is also about empowerment. It's not about solving everything for everyone. It's about building platforms and systems that enable others to succeed. The best outcomes happen when people are equipped to change their own futures. That's the difference between charity and long-term change. One is about help, the other is about transformation. One is about relief, the other is about resilience. There's a kind of freedom in understanding that the real value of your work won't be measured while you're around to see it. It will show up in the students who become scientists, the farmers who become climate leaders, the children who become teachers because someone believed in them early on. And maybe that's the goal, to contribute to a world where fewer people are left behind and more people get the tools they need to thrive. No one can take their wealth or achievements with them, but what you can leave behind is something better, opportunity. Systems that function, solutions that last, a world that's more equitable, more stable, more prepared than it was before. That's not just a legacy worth aiming for, it's one worth accelerating toward. Because in the end, the impact of a life isn't measured by how much was gathered. It's measured by how much was given, how much was shared, how much was built so others wouldn't have to start from zero. That's a legacy worth working for, one that matters now and even more later. When people think about philanthropy, they often picture something very traditional, writing a check, supporting a cause, funding a charity. And while those things have their place, the scale of today's problems requires a different mindset. It calls for the same kind of thinking we apply in the world of innovation, a willingness to take risks, to learn from failure, to move quickly when something works, and to stop when it doesn't. In short, philanthropy should mirror the best of innovation. Because if the goal is to solve big problems, then we have to be just as rigorous, just as dated, driven, and just as ambitious as we are in any forming business or tech endeavor. What drives innovation is curiosity coupled with execution. You identify a problem, test a solution, iterate, measure, and scale. The same process should guide how we give. It's not enough to feel good about doing something. We have to ask if it's actually working. Are we reducing child mortality? Are we improving learning outcomes? Are communities more resilient because of what we're funding? If the answer isn't clear, we need to dig deeper. Giving isn't about intentions alone. It's about results. One of the great advantages of philanthropy is its flexibility. Unlike governments, which are bound by bureaucracy and political cycles, or private companies, which are driven by profits and shareholders, philanthropic capital is free to move fast and take on risk. That freedom comes with a responsibility to be bold, to try what others can't or won't, to fund areas that are too early, too uncertain, or too complex for the market to touch. Innovation doesn't happen by playing it safe, and neither does real impact. This also means being comfortable with failure. In any innovative environment, not everything works, and that's okay. What matters is how quickly we learn and adapt. When an approach doesn't deliver, the response shouldn't be to keep funding it out of habit or pride. It should be to ask why it failed and what can be improved. That mindset of continuous feedback and course correction isn't just good business, it's good philanthropy. Technology offers powerful tools for measuring impact, tracking progress, and predicting outcomes. But the human side of the equation can't be ignored. The best solutions don't just come from labs or boardrooms. They come from listening to the people closest to the problem. That's another lesson from innovation. Co-creation leads to better design. Whether it's healthcare, education, agriculture, or financial inclusion, the people living the reality of these challenges often have the clearest insight into what's needed. The job of philanthropy is to lift those voices, fund those ideas, and help scale what works. Speed also matters, not for the sake of moving fast, but because delay has consequences. A vaccine that reaches a population 6 months earlier can save thousands more lives. A student who gets a learning intervention at the right age might avoid a lifetime of disadvantage. These aren't abstract metrics. They're real outcomes with a ticking clock. In the tech world, speed is often about competitive edge. In philanthropy, it's about saving lives and expanding opportunity. And that raises the stakes even higher. Another key principle of innovation is scalability. Solving a problem in one place is good, but solving it for millions is transformative. Philanthropy needs to think in terms of systems, not just projects. It should look for leverage points, places where the right intervention can trigger broader change. It should invest in infrastructure, in policy, in open knowledge that others can build on. If a solution works in one village, the next challenge is figuring out how to bring it to 10, 0, 0, 0 more. That's not just generosity, it's strategy. Partnership is another lesson worth borrowing. Just like no startup succeeds alone, no single organization can solve global challenges in isolation. Philanthropy should collaborate with governments, with researchers, with communities, with other donors. The goal isn't to own the solution, the goal is to accelerate it. And that means being transparent, sharing what works, and sometimes even funding competitors if it gets the job done. Above all, there needs to be a mindset shift. From charity to problem solving, from one-time help to long-term thinking, from feel good actions to measurable outcomes, the tools are available. Data, analytics, modeling, digital platforms. What's needed is a sense of responsibility to apply them with the same seriousness we apply in other sectors. When philanthropy embraces the principles of innovation, it becomes more than just giving. It becomes a force multiplier, a driver of real, lasting change, and the more we treat it like an engine for progress rather than a side activity, the more lives we can improve, and the faster we can do it. The problems we're trying to solve are urgent, the opportunities to solve them are real, and the potential for impact is immense, but only if we stop treating philanthropy like tradition and start treating it like innovation. That's when it starts to matter. That's when it starts to work. There's a responsibility that comes with wealth, not just to use it wisely, but to ensure that those who inherit it or build it themselves understand what it's really for. The future won't be shaped by today's resources alone. It will be shaped by how the next generation chooses to use those resources. And that's why preparing future stewards of wealth is just as important as solving problems with it right now. Because money in the hands of people who lack purpose or context can do as much harm as good. But when guided by curiosity, compassion, and discipline, it becomes one of the most powerful tools for progress. The goal isn't to tell people exactly what to do with wealth, but to equip them to ask the right questions. Questions like, what matters to me? Where can I do the most good? How do I make decisions that balance urgency and sustainability? How do I make sure I'm not just funding noise, but creating change? These aren't easy questions, but they are essential. They force a shift from consumption to contribution, from legacy as personal branding to legacy as global problem solving. No one is born knowing how to give effectively. It's a skill just like anything else. It takes practice. It takes humility. It takes a willingness to learn from mistakes and from people who have spent their lives working on the ground close to the issues. And it takes mentors, not just parents, but networks, advisors, educators, who can challenge and inspire the next generation to think critically and act with integrity. The mindset isn't inherited, it's cultivated. A lot of people assume that if someone is given great resources, they'll naturally want to do something great with them. That's not always true. Without perspective, even well-intentioned giving can fall short or backfire entirely. But when people understand the scale of global inequality, the urgency of climate change, the fragility of health systems, the power of innovation, they start to see wealth differently. It becomes less about status and more about strategy. Less about comfort and more about opportunity for others. It's also important to communicate that giving isn't a sacrifice, it's a privilege. The ability to take part in solving real problems is something to be grateful for. It's not a burden, it's a kind of freedom that most people never get. That reframing matters, especially for young people who might feel overwhelmed by expectations or unsure of where to start. They need to hear that they don't have to fix everything. But they do have to begin. The good news is that more people are waking up to this. There's growing awareness that wealth without purpose is empty, and that meaningful impact is more satisfying than any material reward. The challenge is making sure this awareness turns into action. That means building infrastructure to support better giving, more transparency, better data, stronger partnerships, and smarter tools. But it also means building a culture where generosity, strategy, and accountability are core values, not just optional extras. Another piece of this is storytelling. People are more likely to act when they can see themselves in the stories of others. Sharing what's worked, what hasn't, what surprised you. This kind of openness helps normalize thoughtful giving. It lowers the barrier for entry. It makes the whole process feel less like a performance and more like a journey. If future stewards of wealth can learn early on that it's okay to make mistakes, that asking for help is smart, and that impact comes from iteration, not perfection, they'll be far better equipped to lead. There's also an important distinction to make between visible giving and effective giving. Not every dollar needs to come with a press release. Some of the most transformational work happens quietly through long-term commitments behind the scenes support and patient capital. Future leaders should understand that visibility is not the goal, impact is. Sometimes the most meaningful work never trends on social media, and that's okay. The question isn't just how wealth gets spent. It's how wisely, how urgently, and how courageously it gets used. The next generation will inherit not just assets, but challenges that demand bold action. And if we want them to meet that moment well, we need to invest now in how they think, how they prioritize, and how they lead. Ultimately, preparing future stewards of wealth is about creating a mindset, one that sees wealth not as a reward, but as a responsibility, not as something to protect, but something to unlock. A mindset that understands the real return on investment isn't financial, it's human. It's measured in lives improved, in systems strengthened, in futures made possible. Because wealth that ends with one person is a missed opportunity, but wealth that becomes a bridge across generations, across continents, across broken systems, is what truly endures. That's the kind of stewardship the world needs more of, and that's what we should be working to inspire. So, when people ask, why give it away so fast? I ask, why wait? And if you're in a position to help, and many are in ways big or small, start sooner. Start now, not because it looks good, but because it is good. And because the clock isn't ticking for the wealthy. It's ticking for those we could help if we choose to act. Let's stop measuring legacy in dollars. Let's measure it in lives made better, because in the end, it's not about how much we have. It's about how much we gave while we still had the time to make it count.